And so, okay, I'm going to present this paper of ours that's a data set for evaluating legal question answering on private international law. And okay, so why private international law, first of all? And that's the first question I'm trying to answer. The answer is that this is a complex legal domain, as you are aware of, and that presents frequent conflicting norms between a lot of legal sources, a hierarchy of legal sources, legal domains, adopted procedures, and so on, and so forth. So it's quite complex to be able to somehow handle all these different informations, all this information. And so legal experts in this case have to access heterogeneous sources to apply hermeneutics, and also they have to possess a deep understanding of legal language. And at least this is clear to me, not being a legal expert at all. I'm more computer science. So when I try to read some kind of legal source, I always struggle to sometimes disambiguate the meanings from natural language to legal language, in a sense. Anyway, so hermeneutics is still an important aspect to be aware of when analyzing these legal sources. And so reasoning over private international law is quite challenging, especially if it's automated reasoning, and especially when regulations change frequently or are big enough in size. And so even for a human can be daunting in some cases because of the differences, the subtle but clear and strong differences between jurisdictions and the sources. And so here we go to our research question. So the idea is that we identified this being a challenging challenging aspect to tackle, a challenging problem for artificial intelligence. We are interested in providing automated answers to questions written by legal experts for extracting information out of private international law legislative texts. And so this is kind of challenging, according to state of the art, at least. And so the first point is to be able to evaluate such a tool, any kind of tool for automated answering to these questions. And properly evaluating requires the identification of a data set, an evaluation data set. And this was the very first, let's say, step we had to take in order to consider, in order to develop any kind of automated question answering tool. And so this is why we are focusing today with this paper. We are focusing on this kind of on a data set, because it's mandatory for any kind of tool for the evaluation, proper evaluation. So we improved over our previous work using a larger and more curated data set on private international law, and we published that work on Jurix 2020. And we decided to extract the data set out of the 3 regulations European Union from the European Union, and these are Rome 1 regulation that's on the law applicable to contractual obligations, Rome 2 regulation that's on the law applicable to non-contractual obligations, and Brussels 1 bis on jurisdiction and the recognition and enforcement of judgments in civil and commercial matters. So
8 more minutes, please.
Sure. So the target of our tool is the practicing lawyers with reasonable yet not expert knowledge of private international law. And so this dataset is clearly going to be a set of questions and answers, and expected answers for that questions. And these expected answers are in the form of articles, recitals, or commission statements, if any. In this case, we decided to consider recitals beside articles because the user persona could be interested in prima facie interpretative tools. And so we followed a methodology for building the data set. So we asked to 5 legal experts to be involved in this. And so 2 of them selected the questions, trying to not be speculative or trying to be agnostics to elements that are placed outside the regulations. While other 2 independent experts try to find a set of expected answers using only the information within the regulations. And they had to avoid interaction with each other. And after this process, we had to merge the answers given by the 2 legal experts because there were subtle divergences between them. And so we used a 3rd legal expert to do that, disposing of a higher level of expertise. And so furthermore, we also classify the questions according to a heuristic we called context specificity. And so we labeled questions as highly specific when the answers were exactly in the domain of the regulations. And normally when they were falling just in part within the scope, and otherwise low specificity was given to the question. After the process, we had 17 questions, and of them, particularly 1/3 of them had a low specificity, 1/3 a normal specificity, and 1/3 a high specificity. And we also try to evaluate the data set in a sense using a tool. So we try to understand the behavior of existing tools on the new data set. And so we took the one from our previous experiments, the one mentioned before from Juris 2020. And the expectations were that the QA tool, the question answering tool, was likely to not perform well on questions with low specificity because supposedly they require multi-hop reasoning, and that tool was not equipped with that capabilities. And so this is a screenshot of the tool. So you see the question and the answers. After the evaluation process, we got the scores, and we grouped them by questions specificity. And we observed that the expectations were somehow met because we saw that the F1 scores increased proportionally to the context specificity. And that's quite reasonable because the specificity of the question is low when it asks something that is not closely related to the regulations. Multi-hop reasoning is usually required to answer questions with low specificity, but the baseline was not equipped for that, as we said. And so, as an example, this question, how should a contract be interpreted according to this regulation? This has a very low specificity, because it probably requires to pinpoint both recitals and articles for a proper answer. And so therefore more distinct and distant paragraphs. And so requiring multi-hops in the regulations, in the knowledge graph, at least, the underlying the regulation. And so our belief is that most of the speculative questions would require broader view on the subject matter, having a low specificity to the regulations, therefore requiring multi-hop reasoning. So this paper, this dataset should help us in the future to evaluate properly new algorithms, to understand whether they're failing to different tasks, because question answering is probably involving different tasks. It involves answering to questions with a low or medium or high specificity. And being able to disentangle them could be beneficial for evaluation. And so we extended our previous work presented during Juris 2020, proposing this larger and more curated data set for the evaluation of private international law, of questions on private international law. And that's it. So I think I finished. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francesco Sovrano. We'll have a question for you. And at the third section of your paper, when you talk about context specificity, you say that multi-hop reasoning is usually required to answer questions with a low specificity, but the baseline is not equipped for that kind of reasoning yet. What are the main challenges to make your model able to answer this type of question?
Oh, no, okay. Yeah, it's quite challenging, especially in this context. If you look at state-of-the-art question answering tools, especially applied to legal knowledge, they always try to handle single or two-hop reasoning questions. It's very challenging to go farther, in a sense. But I believe that one of the process, one of the ways to go could be to integrate this question answering tool that is mainly based on deep language models, to integrate this tool with external reasoning tools. They are designed to handle multi-hop reasoning questions, in a sense. So the point here is that we have natural language, and that's quite and that's good for deep language models. We have formal reasoning tools that are not capable of handling natural language. So the challenge is to be able to, as always, in a sense, to bridge the gap between natural language and formal languages. And I believe that with the tool we are providing, we are using as baseline, this is possible by extending the knowledge graph, in a sense, the underlying knowledge graph that is used to answering questions, with new information coming from these reasoning tools. And that could be possible by, I don't know, using some discourse theory or some, by analyzing the language, the structure of the language and the information within the language in a proper way by means of existing theories of language, natural language, such as discourse theory or argumentation theory or so on. So I believe that this could be possible in a sense to, just to approximate some proper, let's say, level of multi-hop reasoning. I don't know, it's open, it's still an open problem for us.
Perfect.